and welcome. I hope you're doing well this week. End of the school year is coming up if it's not already for you, so congratulations. Hi, just saying congrats at the end of the year if you're there, and you're so close if you are almost there. Wishing you all the best either way. If you just want to throw in something you're excited to do this summer, that would be great. This summer, we're hoping to get on at least one family trip to a beach. My toddler's never been to one before. So yeah, if you just want to throw in the chat anything you're excited about this summer, let's keep those spirits up if you're not already at your break yet. And we'll get started here in about 1 minute. I want to let any time for people to hop in. 2 is about the time everyone starts getting on. So if you just want to find the chat box and just drop in there anything you're excited, excuse me, excited about this summer, that would be great. So hopefully my family is going to get to the beach, I hope, and my toddler can see the beach for the first time. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. We'll let anyone else who hops in hop in here. All right, in the chat box, we've got nothing exciting. Okay, so let me leave the chat. All right, looks like we're about to get started. So welcome to Beyond the Grade, Unleashing the Power of Effective Feedback. Also, welcome to Office Hours. If you haven't been to one of these before, get ready. It's a fast and furious 30-minute professional development webinar. Also, grab those smart devices as we are going to use QR codes and some links to interact with each other. We like to learn with and from each other on these webinars. It's always so much fun to check in with people that we don't get to see very often or don't get to work with very often. So I will be putting links in the chat box, or you can access them via QR code, or if neither of those are your cup of tea, you're not comfortable with them, you are always more than welcome to use the chat box. All right, so let's get ready. We've got a big day. Okay, so scan the QR code using the camera on your phone, or I'm going to post a link in the chat box, and this is going to take you to Padlet. Using Padlet, you are going to do a strategy called Rose and Thorn. Now, I modified this just a little bit, and it is going to ask you what is easy, your rose, and difficult, your thorn, about giving feedback. So within Padlet, you are going to have the opportunity to write down a rose and a thorn. And if this isn't working or it's not your cup of tea, feel free to put it in the chat box. And keep in mind, what is easy for some people may be difficult for others. When it opens, if you're using a smartphone, you may need to scroll left or right to see rose and thorn. Sometimes they're cut off to the side, just a heads up there. All right, so one thing for me while you guys are logging in and thinking about things, I always found it easy to talk with my students about the feedback. That was never an issue for me, but I've always really struggled with getting that timely feedback. So I just, you have 170 plus kids some days in middle school and high school, and trying to get all of them interacted with and timely feedback on all the assignments is just a lot. So I always really struggled there. So what are some things you guys struggle with or found really easy in terms of feedback? All right, and if we're not comfortable sharing, that is totally fine too. So feedback, according to the Education Endowment Foundation, is information that is given to the learner about the learner's performance relative to learning goals or learning outcomes. So feedback is one of those crucial elements for our personal and professional growth. So let's explore why real quick. Consider a basketball player working on their shooting technique. Without any feedback, it could take a really long time and a lot of practice to get their technique just right. And likely even after all that, it probably would be good, but not as good as it could be. So most athletes and performers rely on feedback to improve their techniques. Feedback, whether it's positive or negative, allows us to learn and improve. So according to John Hattie, because we love research here at GW, and I'm a big fan of educational research, it's one of my jams, his study on effect sizes related to student achievement, feedback has a whopping effect size of 0.7. So the research looked into types of feedback as well and found that feedback of praise, so just saying great job, punishment, don't do that, rewards, here's a sticker, or corrective, you should put a comma here. If that's all you do, that's going to have a very low to medium effect. It'll have some effect, but not as much as it really could. It was also noted that feedback with a lack of information, so you don't tell them why they're putting a comma there or why they're doing a good job, that's going to have a low effect on student achievement. John Hattie's research also notes that feedback needs to be given effectively and timely. Remember, I told you that was one of the things I always struggled with, to lead to the most successful performances and lead to the least amount of frustration and confusion by our learners. So now that we have some background information, we're getting in the mindset of feedback. My name is Meredith Llewellyn, and I am the instructional design specialist here at Goodheart-Willcox Publisher. If you haven't been on one of these before, I've been a classroom teacher, I've done LMS training, technology training, PD presenting, because teachers, we kind of just do everything, right? So now I'm doing instructional design and professional development for you all, and it's one of my favorite times of the week. So our goals today, because it's super important for our learners to stay engaged and know what the rationale is behind what we're doing, we're going to cover our learning outcomes, which today are, you're going to explore the importance of feedback, discover practical strategies to craft actionable feedback, utilize techniques to encourage a growth mindset, and then develop a plan so that you could seamlessly integrate it into your teaching practices as soon as possible. But tomorrow, if you're still teaching, or if you're done for the summer next school year, and if you're done forever, congratulations. All right, so word clouds. Scan the QR code using the camera on your phone, or I'm going to put a link in the chat box here shortly, which takes a hot second, so be patient with me. Okay. So this is going to take us to a tool called Mentimeter, where we're going to make a word cloud. If you've never made a word cloud before, you write down 1 word, 2 words at a time, and the more it comes up, the bigger the word gets. If it's not as popular, it'll be smaller. Feel free to write as many words as you want to about how you would describe growth mindset using 1 word. So growth mindset. For your students, for you in general, professional, educationally, however you want to cover this. And if you are not comfortable with the link or the QR code, you're more than welcome to just drop it into the chat box. So we've got open-minded, 100% growth mindset. You have to have an open mind, non-optional. For me, I typically think of growth mindset as not fixed, as positive, as, those are some of the big ones I think of. I guess unfixed isn't a word, but for this one, it could be. All right, so other than open-minded or positive or not fixed, we have some growth mindset here. So according to Berkeley University, a growth mindset is believing that an attribute can change. It's your positivity, you're open-minded to change. Whereas a fixed mindset is the belief that the attribute is set, it can't change. So for example, a student gets a bad score on a fractions quiz in math. A fixed mindset would be, I'm bad at math, I'm never going to get better, fractions aren't my thing. That would be a fixed mindset. A growth mindset, on the other hand, would be, oh, maybe I need to practice or go to tutoring, or maybe fractions aren't my thing, but I really like decimal. So it is possible to have a growth mindset in one area and a fixed mindset in another. It's not just one thing where you're either a fixed minded person or a growth minded person. Both are possible in the same person. And it is important to note that we're talking about this because people with growth mindsets typically are more successful overall. They're more successful students professionally, and they're typically also happier overall. Now, some classroom tips that I wanted to provide you with for growth mindset that I've learned after my 14 years in the classroom are provide opportunities for students to fail and give them challenges. So not all students are given the opportunity to fail at all. And that means that everything is super high stakes. Maybe in your classroom, you only do these high stake projects. Well, that's going to make it so they don't have these little opportunities to fail. Also, some of our gifted students are rarely given the opportunity to be super challenged and fail. So finding ways to have our gifted students experience some failure before they're in like high stakes at universities or above is really important. Modeling it for students, making sure that you're using growth mindset language instead of saying, oh, I can't do that, I'm bad at that. Saying like, oh, I really struggle with this, but I like doing it. That's one way you can use growth mindset language. Praise the effort and the process behind it, not the intelligence. It's okay to say like, wow, you're really smart every once in a while, but just praising that intelligence isn't going to really help overall. Then, I lost my train of thought. All right, so help students set achievable goals. Setting those achievable goals and then breaking it into milestones will help students see the progress that they're making. So we've all noticed as adults, right? Progress is slow and rarely do you see it, especially yourself. Other people may see it, but rarely do we see it in ourselves. Then celebrate those little mistakes. I know this sounds insane to celebrate a mistake, but show them it's okay to make a mistake. So you know what? Hey, I'm really glad you put that comma there. And now we have a learning experience. It's a really great experience for them to just have those celebrations of little mistakes. And this last one is a teacher favorite whenever I say this at professional development. Don't grade everything, right? Not everything has to be a grade. And if it does need to be a grade in your grade book, make it a completion grade. That gives those students that opportunity to make a mistake, to fail without it being high stakes. They actually typically get the best feedback from those, and it's less work for you. All right, so when you're giving feedback, it's an art form. It takes a lot of practice and a lot of time to do it well. So some components that are going to help you become an expert, if you're not already, at feedback is to make it timely. And this is something that's really hard, right? All those assignments, all those students, not enough allotted time. It's hard to give timely feedback, right? Make them specific. Have delivery. We'll talk about that in a second. Use them with goals and milestones. And when learners give learners post feedback opportunities. So when you're doing something timely for your feedback, that means as soon as possible, right? That may not be within 5 minutes, right? It's not always feasible. Some of those labs I had to grade when I taught science took a couple days, right? But as soon as you can, because the closer to that performance event, the more impact it has. Be as specific as possible. Those generalized feedbacks, there's a time and place, right? Great job. Really proud of you. That means something to the student, right? But if that's all we're doing, that's not going to be as specific and effective as it could be. Also, make sure that when you're giving constructive feedback, that you're not just giving constructive feedback, and make sure that it is worded well and not as super critically as it could be. And don't just give negative feedback. Think about your bosses. If all you've ever gotten are negative feedback, you're probably not going to stay at that job very long. Also, don't just give positive feedback. Students are there to learn and grow, and it's not fair to them if all they hear is you're doing a great job when there are, in fact, ways that they could improve. When you're using it with goals and milestones, feedback is the most effective. So have learners set a goal that's achievable for them, right? That's the differentiation piece in this. Help them write an achievable goal. But also break it down into those milestones, because this lets you celebrate with the students. Say, congratulations, you made it. I'm so proud of you. Look at you did that. That helps them see they can complete things along the way, and they learn to like the process of learning instead of just the end goal. Also, whenever you are given a chance to correct performances based on feedback, learners have the most growth and are the most effective with their growth and feedback. So without a chance to correct it, the learner loses this chance to improve. So what I mean by that is, if I were to give a student a lab on microscopes and say, you know, hey, this was not a great grade, you got a 10 out of 20, maybe give them the feedback of like, hey, here's some areas that we could improve on, and then let them go practice what I did with the microscopes in a new set of slides. So if you're struggling with this, think about a basketball player again. If they received feedback about improving their shot, but then they never got a chance to take those shots with that feedback until the game, that wouldn't be very effective for them. All right. So let's think about feedback in terms of ourselves. So I've given you some strategies for growth mindset. I've given you some components of like feedback that make it very effective. But what does feedback look like in your classroom? So I'm going to put a link in the chat to a Mentimeter, and it's just going to be an open-ended question for you to answer. What does feedback look like in your classroom? So I'm going to put it in the chat box, which is taking a second to load. I apologize. All right. You can click on the link, or you can use the QR code. Either one is fine. And if you're not comfortable with either, please feel free to use the chat box. So what does feedback look like in your classroom? So in my classroom, it might have been me sitting down and talking with the student. It might have been giving out a rubric. It might have been having a student to student conversation where they're working with each other. It might be real quick feedback like, hey, could you put something here? Might have been a sticker, something to that effect. So what does feedback look like in your classroom? Also, while you guys are thinking about it and typing, Mentimeter and Padlet, the tools we're using today, are really great free interactive tools for educators, and they focus on that interactivity and collaboration. So if this is something you're interested in or you like, make sure you check with your IT department first before you try to use it with you and your students, because sometimes there's things that they have to work around or firewalls that are up. So what does feedback look like in your classroom? All right, I gave feedback while students were working on group assignments. I love that. That's actually one of the things I'm going to talk about. So aces, you're rocking it. All right. So here's some feedback strategies. And you already gave one of mine, so awesome job. So feedback sandwiches. That means we've all heard, right? Put positive, negative, positive. So here's an example of how you can do that. Hey, that's really impressive that you remembered that word. I used to teach French. We haven't gone over it in a couple of months. That's your positive feedback. Remember right there that you want to use the word pour because you're talking about being for something. That's your change. And then other than that, it's looking good. Keep it up. That's your positive feedback. The post-learning reflection time. After students complete a project or a lab or a large assignment, paper, whatever you're giving them, give them the opportunity to reflect on what they did and fill out a post-reflection form during post-reflection time. Give them time to think about what they just did. Give them time to process it. So this doesn't have to be long. Typically, it's 2 questions. It could be questions like, what did I do well? And what do I need to improve on? And just have them answer that. If you teach younger grades, they can tell you in person. If you teach older grades, you can have them type it. You can have them write it. You can have pre-printed forms. However you want to do that. There's a lot of ways. And then we try not to make it more than 5 or 6 questions because that just tends to get very overwhelming for students. The sweet spot is right there in that 2 to 3 mark. Glow and grow is similar. You have students, you can give them a pre-printed form. You can have a table on a Microsoft Excel, Google Doc, Word doc. You can have them just rip out a sheet of paper. You can have them talk. You give students the chance to glow about something. So you can glow or they can glow, but that's your positive. There's always something positive that you can find in their work. And then a grow, something to work on. So this strategy says to keep the glows and grows on a 1-to-1 or more glows, right? So more positives, but you don't want to just give a ton of negatives. Then we briefly talked about those learner feedback reporting sheets. Those are anything you do post-learning that lets students reflect on their process and give feedback for themselves, for others, for you. There's a strategy called stars and stairs, which is exactly like it sounds. You can either find stairs and stars online or you can draw them. You can put on a digital tech platform. The stars will indicate what they're doing well, whereas the stairs will indicate what steps they need to take to get to their goal. You can have them write it in the stars. You can write it in the stars. You can have them come and do a micro learning conference, which we'll get to in a second, on steps to get to that goal. And our last one is tag me. So tag is an acronym that students can use when providing feedback to their peers. So T stands for tell or write something you like about your peers' work. A stands for ask a question about their work. G, give one suggestion that your peers can work on. Now, this will need to be practiced, especially the younger the students are, for it to be super effective. You can have this done digitally, pre-printed. You can do it on any tech platform you can think of. You can have students rip out and use their own paper, and then allow time for students to share that information. Okay, so tips and tricks. After 14 years of teaching, these are a couple that I have come up with that I found very effective. So if you're a paper person, nothing wrong with that. You can get a set of stamps or stickers. One way that I was able to get those completion assignments done and back to students real quick was to have a stamp or sticker set, or you can do a check and minus, but that lets you get that feedback quickly without spending too much of your time on one thing. So my feedback stamps would be like, see me, or I like that you, and then I would fill in after that, or, you know, I like that you, but we still need to, okay, so something like that. So it saves your hand all of that writing, just a quick stamp. Pick one thing to focus on. So one of the best and most useful, helpful things that I ever learned about feedback was to pick one thing to focus on. So maybe you're an English teacher and you're focusing on commas or semicolons. Those are really hard for students. Focus on that. If you're a science teacher and you guys are focusing on those thesis statements, focus on those. If you're working on a project and you're working on maybe diagramming or drafting, focus on that. So focus on one thing to give your feedback on. My friends who were in EBD or shop classes, FACS classes, they always found this tip really helpful because there's so much stuff for them to give feedback on in such a short amount of time. Also, this will keep in mind that this will keep students from reaching what we call cognitive overload. So cognitive overload is when students get too much information and they just can't deal with it. It's not necessarily a bad thing for them. They're not going to necessarily shut down. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. It's just they can't process anymore. So it keeps that to a normal amount for them to process. And keep in mind that cognitive load changes by age group. So what a 13-year-old can handle, a 9-year-old can't. Another one is to have students give feedback to each other, right? Let students practice this. So the younger they are, they will need more practice. Then start with small things like give them a completion work to give feedback on each other. Pick one strategy like a glow and grow and then have them use that on repeat. Don't change it. It will cause a lot of chaos. Also, you may want to do printed forms, a Word doc, something like that, so they have a place to get their thoughts all written down for. And my last tip for that one is when you are having them pick their partners, randomly assign it. Don't let them pick it. Or one kid will get everybody, or they'll get to their best friend. Just randomly assign it and then switch them about 3 times. Then use rubrics. So using a rubric will keep you on track and help you standardize your grading and help you focus in so it takes less time. There's a tool called Magic School AI that will help you create rubrics on your own. It's an AI tool. GW does not sponsor it or anything. It's just one that I have found helpful and passed on to a couple of my friends who are still teachers. Have digital sentence starters if you're a digital person that you can just copy and paste and then fill in, or use the dictation for Microsoft Word. And then this one is what you already said, because you guys are super great at this. Plan stations while you're doing your learning conferences. So have students doing something else. Do micro one-on-one. So micro one-on-one is you have your students for the day on a list. You've printed off their work. It's in order. You've got a timer. You set your timer. You get 2 to 3 minutes with that student, no more, no less. And that's what you work on. Always take that full time. Even if you're not doing feedback, that's a great time to get to know those students and have them build a relationship connection point with you. Have a way for students to ask you questions, like a digital parking lot or a place where they can leave comments, a sticky note, a box on your desk, some way that they can ask you questions about the project or have feedback of their own. And lastly, one thing I want to say is praise does have a time and a place. So praise is okay. Saying, great job, I'm really proud of you, that was awesome. So everyone needs to hear those things. It shouldn't be the only thing you're saying, but it does have a place. All right. So our last thing we're going to do today is called I apologize. My computer just restarted in the middle of this, so I am so sorry. That was not my intent. I'm pulling everything up as quickly as I can to get you guys back to where we were. Our last strategy that we were going to go over is called Palms and Muddiest Point. I don't want to waste your time, and I want to be very cognizant of it. So give me 1 second. My computer sounds like a rocket ship is taking off. For today, we are going to move on from that. The presentation is hopefully pulling up, but while it does, I'm going to put your attendance in the chat box. So this is a certificate for today that will make sure that you get your attendance for today. And then I want to do a quick recap. If you don't mind filling out an evaluation code for today, there's a quick 6-question form that I'm going to put here in the chat box along with your attendance for today. And it is going to apparently issues as well. All right, there we go. It's going to ask you to give feedback about this webinar. I do personally read over them and make sure that there are ways that I can improve my webinars and help you all out. And then the last thing I want to go over is, if you are interested, our next webinar is on June 4th, and it is over supercharging your student engagement using the 5E process. And we are not just using it in terms of science, we're using it in terms of everybody. So if you don't mind, there's your attendance certificate for today. There is your evaluation. If you don't mind filling that out, a quick feedback form for me. And then if you're interested, you can click on the link for next webinar, which is on June 4th. Or we will send the registration link out again in an email that you use to register with this webinar. So with that, I apologize for the computer freezing and restarting. That's always an exciting. It wouldn't be teaching if you didn't have some technological error, right? So I will talk to you later. Have an absolutely stellar week. If you're done, congratulations. If not, you're going to make it. You're almost there. Have a great one. It was so great learning from you guys. Bye.